Hello and welcome. My name's George, and my channel is all about helping you get the most out of Logic Pro so that you can record and produce your best music in your home studio. Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive on the session bass player found in Logic Pro 11. I'm going to go through all the functions and features, and then I'll show you how you can customize it to make it fit into your own track. So let's dive in. Okay, so as you can see, I've got a session started here, and we're just going to go ahead and add a bass player to this. So the first thing we'll do is add a new track with the plus button up here. And under session player, we'll select bass player. Now from this menu, we can choose our bass player style, but that's also something we can change later. So for example, we've got pop rock, retro rock, pop songwriter, and all these other styles as well. And here we can tell the bass player to follow a default chord progression or not. I'm just going to leave that unchecked for the moment, and I'll show you what I mean by a chord progression and chord track once we add this bass player in. So I'll just go ahead and click create, and that created our bass player region here. And I'm just going to go over and drag this to the chorus because that's where I'm going to be demonstrating for this track. Now, before we dive into the session bass player, I quickly want to mention about chord tracks. So if you go up to your global tracks, which is up here, this little button here, now you'll see here there's this chord track, and you'll notice I've already inputted some chords here. So these correspond to the chords and the other instruments that I've already played in on this track. Now I have a whole nother tutorial dedicated to the chord track. So if you want to learn more about that, please go check that out, and I'll leave that link below. But in any case, these are the chords that the session bass player is going to follow. So I'm just going to go ahead and hide that once again. And I'll go ahead and press play so you can hear what it sounds like right off the bat. So there you go. Pretty cool that it just generates a bass line for you. Now let's dive into all the different controls and features. So for starters, as we saw when I first loaded in, there was the different styles. So if you want to change that after the fact, you just go here. Currently we're on the modern Motown. So if I click on that, then you'll see all the other bass players that we have available to us. So we could switch to pop rock, or any of the other bass players that are available to us. I think the closest one for this track might be modern R&B, so let's start with that, and we might adjust as we need to. Now, the other thing we can do if you want to get some quick results are the different presets. So if we go over here where it says presets, and right now we're set to Lyrical Jam, and we could try any number of these. So maybe let's check out this Soul Flow and see what that sounds like. Okay, so that gives us a starting point. Now let's dive in to the rest of these controls and see how we can really craft this for this current song we have. So the two things that are going to make the biggest impact are this complexity and intensity slider. So complexity is going to control kind of the busyness of the bass player. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here. So if I pull this down, you'll see we have kind of some longer notes and fewer notes. If I bring this up, we're seeing a lot more notes and shorter notes, so making it quite a bit busier. So I'm going to probably dial this back quite a bit. And intensity, so this just refers to the dynamics, so how hard the bass player is playing. So if we bring this all the way down, you'll see the notes got quite a bit smaller. If I bring it up, then they get quite a bit bigger. And this not only affects the volume, but also kind of the tone of the instrument, because if you can imagine, if a bass player is hitting the string harder, it's going to have a different tone than if they're hitting the string softer. So let's put this kind of maybe 75%. Now let's move over here to the different pattern options we have. So if we click on here, you'll see there's a list of 6 patterns, and you'll see these little dots here, and these correspond to the rhythm of the pattern, so where the notes might hit rhythmically. So we change to say pattern 2, you'll see those notes rearranged again based on the pattern that you see up here. Now below that, we also have this follow rhythm of. So chords, this would follow the chord track once again, and would follow the rhythm based on where those chords are placed. And then one of my favorite things to do is to follow the rhythm of another track. So if we click on here, now you'll see all the tracks that I have in this project. So I can actually tell it to follow the rhythm of my drum track, for example. So I click on that, and that's going to more closely follow to the drum track that I already have. So let's see what that's sounding like now. Okay, we're starting to get closer, but still want to make a few tweaks to this. So let's move on to melody here. And this will control kind of how busy the bass player is melodically. So meaning how many different notes are they going to use? So for example, if we choose root only, then it'll just play the bass note from our chord progression. So other than fills and things, it'll just stick to kind of one note, in this case, per bar. So, for example, these notes, these are all the roots notes that it's sticking to, but it's still throwing in these kind of fills, which is controlled by the fill amount and fill complexity. So if I were to bring this down to 0, for example, then it's just going to stick to that root note. So instead of root only, I'm going to go to some notes, and then we have more notes and most notes. So most notes is obviously going to be the most melodically complex. Now next we have octaves. So we can choose either no octaves, some octaves, or more octaves. So if we do no octaves and roots only, then we're just staying on the one note per bar as per the chord track. But I'm going to go back to some notes, and let's do some octaves. So octaves would be the same note, but just in a different register. So for example, the first chord is an E minor. So there'd be a low E and a high E. And then the phrasing, this is how long those notes are being sustained for. So if we select short, for example, you'll see all the notes kind of shorten up, which might sound like this. So more percussive sounding. And if we choose long, then we're going to get more sustained notes. So in this case, I kind of like the long notes. And then we can choose what we want the lowest note to be So right now it's set to E1. We can bring this all the way down to a B if we wish. I'm going to stick with the E though. And then fill amounts, let's dial this back just a little bit. I don't want it too busy, but maybe a few little fills here and there. But I am going to dial back the fill complexity. So the fill amount is going to be how often those fills happen, and then fill complexity is once they happen, how complex those fills are going to be. And then we can adjust the swing as well. So this is going to relate to kind of the feel of either 8th notes or the 16th notes. Now in this song, everything's pretty straight, so I might just dial this back a little bit. Let's see what it's sounding like now. Cool. Again, getting closer. I might just bring up the complexity a little bit and just see how that works for us. Okay, now let's move over to the Details tab. Now, each different bass style has slightly different options found in this section. So dead notes here, this is going to control kind of the amount of percussive notes, so kind of non-pitch notes, kind of slaps and things like that. So if we want more of that, we can add that in, or less, we can take that out. So you'll notice kind of those few notes before the downbeat, right? So these notes, for example, we've got a couple more of those in. And then we've got slides. Let's see what that sounds like if we add a few of those in. So you can see it added one in right here. So let's have a listen to that. That's kind of cool. So now here, pickup notes. So this is going to add in kind of some more percussive hits. So we click that. You can see how that's added in a few of those kind of percussive slap notes as well. I'm just going to go ahead and turn that off. Dynamic mute. This is going to add in some more muted notes again based on kind of the surrounding notes. In this case, it's not making a change to what we currently have. I suspect if we were to boost up the complexity that we would see a change, but I don't want to mess with that at the moment as I'm liking where we're at. And then align root. So this relates to when the bass player's moving into the next chord. So it's going to kind of melodically lead in to the next chord. So I'm going to leave that. Double stops. So this is when a bass player is going to play two notes at the same time, like a chord, for example. So if I bring that up, you'll see a few here. Kind of cool, actually, but I think I'll just keep it simple. So bring that back down to 0. So mute offset, this will affect how heavily muted these kind of dead notes are. And laid back, this is going to affect the feel of the bass player by laying back the last 16th note of a beat to kind of give it a more laid back feel. So if you keep an eye on these notes, for example, and if I bring this up, you'll see how those kind of shifted over. to be placed a little bit later and give it that kind of laid back feel. And related to that, we also have feel control here, which is going to kind of affect the whole pattern. So again, if you take a look at the notes, and if I go back to pull, you'll see how they all kind of shift to be played a little bit later. And if we go to push, then they'll be played a little bit earlier. I might go a little bit late just because it's a bit of a laid back track. So have a bit of a more laid back feel there. And then dynamics, this is going to be to control how wide of a range of dynamics that we have. So from soft to loud. So if we want everything kind of played at the same velocity, you can pull that to 0. So everything will be kind of the same volume, or 100%. You'll see that there's some differences between all the different bass notes being played. I'm just going to leave that in the middle, 100%. And then humanize. So this is going to affect how much each of the notes are quantized. So how much they're right on the beat. So if we do this 0%, then everything is going to be kind of bang on the beat. And if we do it at 100%, you'll see how some things shift around and will be a little bit looser. So again, I'm going to put that maybe, let's go 50% in the middle. So not super tight and not super loose either. And then tempo, right now it's set to standard. We can do half time, which will give us a lot less notes, or double time, which will give us a lot more notes, or just standard time. Now, the last control we have is this manual, where we can actually create our own pattern. So here we have one bar, and each of these blocks represents a 16th note. So if you just wanted the downbeats, for example, you could do that. And when you input a manual progression, that's going to replace the pattern that we had chosen over here. And it's no longer following my drum track that we had before. So I'm just going to go back and select the previous pattern that we had. And now that's back to following my drums. So let's have another listen to this and make sure that we're happy with it. Okay, cool. That's pretty close. Now there's a couple little things that I want to tweak. And when we get to this point and you really want to nitpick some things, what we can do is convert this region to MIDI. And that way I can adjust any of these notes as I please. So to do that, we'll just right click on our region here, and you'll see convert to MIDI up here. But if you don't see that, you want to go to convert and then convert to MIDI region. And then now we have all our notes kind of laid out. Now there was a few kind of rhythmic things I wanted to change. Let me just have another listen. This one, it sounds a little bit late to me, so I'm just going to change that. And this one, I want to make it a little bit earlier as well. Cool. So I'm pretty happy with that. Now, the last thing I'll quickly go over is the bass instrument itself. So when you load in the bass player, it's going to load in the studio bass instrument that you can open up here. And here's where we can tweak the actual sound of the instruments. So we have some different basses that we can change to. and we can adjust the tone as well. Now, the other thing you can do is if you happen to have a third-party bass plugin that you prefer, is you can change that all together. So all you have to do is go to your track, and for example, if you want to use a contact instrument, you can load that up on your track. And let's say I prefer this Rickenbacker bass. We can load that in, and I'll just mute the previous effects that were on there. Now we have a totally different bass sound with that same pattern. So I hope you enjoyed that video. If you have any more questions about the session bass player, please leave those in the comments below. And if you want to improve your workflow in Logic Pro, don't forget to download my free Ultimate Logic Pro Starter Pack. This includes my Logic Pro hotkey cheat sheet, my audio recording guide, my mixing guide, my gear guide, and also my Logic Pro session templates. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for all your likes and subscribes, and we'll see you in the next one.